Greetings, my scattered brothers and sisters in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that his presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. Well, I can't get away from that question that Jesus asked Peter in Mark chapter 8, is verse 29. Jesus said to Peter, "But what about you? Who do you say that I am?" And of course, Peter answered, "You are the Christ." We talked the other day about how that was kind of a miracle that Peter finally saw who Jesus was, that he's the Christ, how Peter had been basically blind, kind of trying to figure it out. And Jesus even getting frustrated with Peter. Do you still not see? Do you still not understand? And then we had that miracle where Jesus healed the blind man. And now Jesus asked Peter, do you see anything? Same question he asked the blind man, only it's reworded for Peter, who do you say that I am? Peter gets it now, at least at some level, you're the Christ. And so, but that question, who do you say that I am? It just kind of continues to linger, and it's a question that we all have to answer. I teach an online class, and there's a section of the class that covers the Gospel of Mark, and the students are to write a response. And the response that they're asked to write is, okay, having read the Gospel of Mark, who do you say that Jesus is? So kind of the same question that Jesus is asking, who do you say that I am? The responses I get from my students are really interesting. They come from all different backgrounds. Many of them are not believers. So they come from all different backgrounds, and they're impressed with Jesus by the time they read through the Gospel of Mark. But it's almost like they think they get to decide who Jesus is. And so some of them decide that Jesus is a good teacher. Some of them decide that he provides a great example. They're all over the place. But the nature of the question in our context today is almost like we get to decide who Jesus is. Mark has already told us who Jesus is, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And yet when the question gets asked to my students, who do you say that Jesus is? It's almost like they have the privilege, they have the right, the authority to define who Jesus is. Like I get to decide that Jesus is a great teacher, or I get to decide that Jesus provides a good example, or that Jesus models for us what it means to serve. It's like we get to decide who Jesus is. No. We don't get to decide who Jesus is. Jesus is who Jesus is. And the question is, are we going to see clearly who Jesus is? And that's the very challenging thing. And so if I get to define Jesus, then Jesus really doesn't have a claim on me. If I get to decide that, well, Jesus is that or Jesus is this, it doesn't matter what I decide. It's like I'm the one who's deciding. Jesus doesn't have a claim on me. But if I see who Jesus is, that he is the Christ, that he is the Son of God, now all of a sudden, instead of me defining Jesus, well, actually, Jesus is going to define me. And he has a claim on me. And so if I'm seeing him clearly, that he's the Christ, the Son of God, then that means there's really only one response that is fitting for me, and that's to surrender to him, and that's to follow him, and that's to acknowledge that he is Lord and I'm not. And so that question just kind of continues to linger, almost haunt. Who do you say that I am? Who I say Jesus is doesn't change who Jesus is. He's the Christ, he's the Son of God. Do I see that clearly? And if I see it clearly, then the question is, okay, Jesus, what do you want to do with me? Who do you say that I am? What's your claim on my life? How am I going to surrender to you? How am I going to follow you? Kind of a whole different set of questions. It's easy to kind of dismiss, this whole thing in terms of non-believers, but I think it happens a lot with believers too, where we believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, but we still want to be the ones to kind of define who Jesus is rather than acknowledging his claim upon our lives. So wherever you find yourself scattered today, my prayer for you and my prayer for me is that we would see clearly that Jesus is the Christ, that we don't define who Jesus is. Jesus is who he is. But in seeing who he is, we live surrendered to him and we follow him. May God grant us grace to see clearly and to live surrendered, following Jesus. Well, God bless. Have a great day.